Liars. The word hung there. It looked good above all their heads. Rowan breathed in the room's recipe: lemon oil, snow, hot breath, cold stone, old varnish, a thread of cigar, a bite of turpentine, the sugar-glazed ghost of dessert. He tasted in it a story of hands on things they had no business touching, and hands refusing, conspicuously, to touch what would save them. He put the will gently beneath the painting's frame as if returning a devotional to its altar. When he spoke again, it was with the quiet logistics of a man who knows that drama gets solved by lists. "We are not done here," Rowan said. "We will search the study, the service corridors, the basement hatch, the safe where Victor kept the original will, the little drawer where Anders keeps the Fox letter opener. We will find the rag that smells of turpentine and the wrapper from the charcoal. We will look for a sheath, because the sound I heard in the dark was a blade leaving one, not a drawer. And we will reconcile 3 clocks to one truth." He let them breathe briefly. "But before that," he added, "we are going to stand here for 1 full minute and do nothing, and in that minute you will each remember exactly what your hands did when the lights failed. Because when we move again, I will notice what your story forgot to include." He took out his watch, wound it once, and let the second hand climb. The storm hummed. The boiler clunked in the bones of the house. Somewhere, a shutter found its hinge and stopped its banging, and there was a peace like a held breath. The torch in Rowan's painted hand seemed, in the peripheral trickery of candlelight, to flicker. At exactly 60 seconds, Rowan closed the watch with a click that sounded like a verdict. "Now," he said, as if he had just opened a door no one else could see, "we begin to remove lies." And if Victor had orchestrated this, then he would have appreciated the line. Part 4. The Search and Secret Rooms. The storm had stopped raging and settled into conviction, one long pressure of wind that pressed its mouth to every seam of the lodge and hummed. That sound made the silence inside feel surgical. Rowan Hale stood at the base of the grand staircase with Anders' heavy key ring in his palm. It felt less like keys and more like custody. "No wandering," Rowan said. "Pairs at minimum, but we move together when possible. If someone peels off, I'll take it as intent." Clara's mouth curved. "A detective and a shepherd." "Only tonight," Rowan said. "Tomorrow I prefer quieter work." Anders, hat in hand, nodded once at the rules as if grateful someone had spoken them aloud. Miles bounced on his heels, a man who could not stand still in the hour after a blow. Graham looked at the banister as if it were a witness he might cross-examine. Lydia opened her notebook and then closed it again without writing a word. Evelyn folded her hands. Rowan led them first to the study. The study. The door resisted on a complaint of hinges. The room had the denser air of places that hoard secrets, tobacco sunk into rugs, lemon oil on wood, and beneath that the nasal sting of something chemical, varnish, maybe, or medicine. Victor's desk was an altar. Papers were spread in the way of men who enjoy their own mess. Rowan's penlight rode the surface. Sketches, charcoal studies of the grotesque portrait they had just seen in the gallery. Clara foreshortened into a cruelty of shadow. Miles with smile dislocated. Graham bent over burning pages. Evelyn behind bars. Lydia's knife catching light. But there were other faces too, half-drawn and abandoned, strangers blurred into archetype. A man with eyes rendered as hollow circles. A woman with threads drawn across her mouth. A child whose hands bled ink. In the margins, words Victor had scratched as if they were labels in a cabinet. Speak, join, confess. A drawer gave Rowan the rattle of bottles. 2 bore labels, sedatives and painkillers, both in Victor's name, dosed high. 4 others were unmarked, their paper torn away clean. Evelyn looked down without touching. "He had access to things he shouldn't," she said, and her tone managed to be observation without judgment. Another drawer yielded a narrow leather ledger. Purchases of art, payments out to names that did not look like names, only shells. Between the arithmetic, single charcoal words, jagged and impatient. Truth, betrayal, silence. Graham hovered too close to see and too far to be accused. "This is meaningless without context," he said. the way a man says, "Please don't read my name out loud." On the mantel, a cigar had been stubbed hard enough to crush the paper ring. Ash flurried the marble. Graham glanced at it, then away, as if the cigar might testify. Rowan shut the ledger and let the room exhale. "We'll come back," he said. "Upstairs." Bedrooms. The staircase complained under their weight. The corridor smelled of lavender and dust. Doors colonized both sides like closed questions. Clara's room was immaculate in the way stage sets are, a canopy bed so exact it looked ironed, the vanity top arranged to be looked at, a hand mirror with a clean star-shaped crack across the glass. On the carpet, a corner of paper peered from beneath the rug. Rowan kneeled and pulled it free. Victor's hand, unmistakable. "You lied when you said it was gone." "I always knew." Clara did not blush. She hollowed. "He wrote for effect," she said. "He always did." Rowan folded the fragment and pocketed it. Miles' room had the headache smell of brandy. Clothes had been undressed from a moving body and dropped where gravity chose. On the desk, IOUs and bravado. Under them, a pawn ticket, 2 months old, a watch. His painting had shown a bare wrist. "It was mine to sell," Miles said fast, a punch rushing his words. "He wouldn't help me, so—" "So you helped yourself," Lydia said lightly. Evelyn's room was clean enough to seem spare. Medical journals rose in annotated towers by the bed, margins tight with her careful script. A candle on the dresser smelled not of spice or rose but antiseptic. Rowan tipped it. Clear wax had set in steady layers, not the stutter of nervous hands. Evelyn watched him watch and allowed herself the smallest smile, professional to professional. Graham's room was neat in the way hotel rooms are, everything placed but nothing lived in. The briefcase was locked. On the sill, a scatter of fine ash the color of regret. "Old jacket," Graham said preemptively, repeating his earlier defense. The jacket did smell of cigar. The room did not. A man who steps outside to smoke and lies about it, Rowan thought, is still a man who chooses control. Lydia's room contained notebooks. Not criticism, pictures. Quick knife-line sketches of the people downstairs, each flaw sharpened. Clara's posture drawn as armor, Miles's grin as crack, Graham's hands as claws, Evelyn's eyes too calm. One composition was of a silhouette with a torch. The shadow ran up the page like a tear. Lydia watched Rowan turn that page over and said nothing, which was its own comment. They closed the last bedroom door and stood in the corridor, listening to the house. A pipe clanked in the wall like a memory. The wind dragged a sleeve across the window. Rowan's light found a scuff at the paneling's edge, wood polished faint by hands that preferred to be unseen. He pressed. A seam opened. The service passage. The narrow stairwell breathed stone and cold. Scratches crossed the plaster, initials, tally marks, dates. Servants once carved here as if to say I was, even if you didn't see me. The passage bottomed into a long corridor that ran the spine of the lodge, parallel to the polished halls above. Dust lay in a winter coat, except where fresh footprints cut a path. Rowan crouched. 2 sets, in and out. Narrow soles, hardly any heel. Not Anders's work boots, not Clara's stilettos. Lydia's city boots, or Evelyn's flats, or a man in evening shoes. The gate line was measured, not panicked. They followed the prints to a door with a rusted latch. A small iron key turned with the reluctant sound of decisions. The hidden room breathed turpentine and something older, mildew, old oil. It did not feel like storage. It felt like intent. The hidden room. Canvases leaned along the walls like bodies propped upright. Half were unfinished, sketchy blocks of tone. Half had been slashed, quick and angry. Faces blurred, mouths stitched in charcoal, eyes scraped white. On a table lay a fan of studies done in fierce, cramped strokes. Beneath one figure Victor had written, "She will not stay silent." Beneath another, "The house keeps their lies." A rag lay stiff with turpentine. A brush was still damp, the bristles combed by fingers in a hurry. Beside them, a knife with paint clinging to its hilt, not the missing bone-handled fox knife, a studio blade used for scraping and palette work. Its edge showed fine scratches where it had been used to pry at something wooden, the edge of a frame, the back of a panel. Clara flinched at the slashed canvases. He was losing his mind. Or finding it, Lydia said, moving closer, hunger back in her hand. This is method. Even the violence is composed. Evelyn looked at the stitched mouths. Symptoms, she said softly. He built us into cases. Graham pointed at the knife. Too convenient, he said, louder than necessary. Someone staged this room to implicate anyone but themselves. Ender's eyes were on the floor, not the walls. The words, "The house keeps their lies," seemed to have been written for him. He swallowed. Mr. Harland came down here alone, he said low. Sometimes late, sometimes I heard him laugh when there wasn't anything to laugh at. Rowan moved through the space in a slow circle, letting the inventory right itself. Charcoal shards on the floor, one stained with green verditer, a canvas shaving curled near the easel, a flake of gesso bright as bone, glass dust on the table's edge as if a bell jar had been lifted and set down wrong. A thin thread caught on a nailhead in the doorway, pale, strong. He pinched it free. Fishing line? No, silk, a thread from a scarf perhaps, or a dress hem. He bagged the rag and the thread. He lifted the studio knife by its paint-crusted hilt and smelled it. Linseed, turpentine, no blood. He set it down where it had been. Look, Lydia said, pointing with her pen. On a primed canvas near the corner, the beginnings of a new painting. 5 vertical strokes in different values, a grid sketched lightly, the ghost of a face blocked in and then wiped out with a hand while still wet. Victor had been starting something at speed, then stopping. A small drop of fresh turpentine clung to the bottom edge. Hours, not days. 2 sets of prints, Rowan said, not to the room, but to the ledger in his head. Someone came here before dinner and again after. The second time, they were in a hurry. He stepped back into the corridor and checked the dust at the corner where the passage turned toward the kitchen line. A narrow groove ran along the baseboard for 3 feet, as if something had been dragged low. A box, a frame, a tool case. He angled his light and found a brass flake the size of a fingernail. He bagged that too. Keep going, he said. If the house keeps lies, it hides them too. The long spine of the house. They followed the service corridor toward the back of the lodge. Pipes sweated along the ceiling and a dull heat burned the air near the boiler room. Anders unlocked a panel marked electrical. Inside, neat rows of breakers labeled in Anders's tidy caps. Dining, gallery, East Hall, foyer. A small plastic bag hung on a hook. Fuse puller. It was not quite where its dust shadow said it lived, an inch off. Rowan touched the bag. A smudge of fine sugar clung to the plastic. Pear tart glaze had been everywhere it shouldn't tonight. The lights failed at 8:34, Anders said, consulting the generator log he'd brought earlier. Jen called at 8:35. Rowan compared the handwritten times to his watch. Your log is accurate, he said. The regulator clock isn't. They checked the boiler, then the coal room, though coal was only a memory. Bagged pellets stacked now where black had once glinted. In the corner, a dumbwaiter shaft opened. Rowan peered down. The rope was frayed slick at one point, as if a weight had been lowered in a hurry and someone's hand had ridden the line. He angled his light. A dark scuff marred the inside edge where something hard had rubbed the wood on the way down. A smear on the rope shone faintly. Oil, or, he smelled it, wax. He opened the dumbwaiter's little door at the top of the run in the pantry. On the sill, a fleck of red wax clung. A candle had been moved through here recently. Why move a candle when the room held dozens? Unless it wasn't a candle, but sealed wax from an envelope. The new will's broken seal had shown the fox crest crushed too soon. He thought of the letter opener in the foyer. Little steel fox, clever tale. Who used the dumbwaiter tonight? He asked. Anders shook his head. Not for service. We played it in the kitchen and walked it in. Evelyn's voice softened. You're thinking like a thief, detective. I'm thinking like a man who heard a sheath in the dark, Rowan said. A dumbwaiter makes a good drop to stash what doesn't belong upstairs. They moved on. A maintenance locker opened on shelves of honest things: nails, wire, tape. One spot on the second shelf showed a clean rectangle where a small tool case had sat for years and had only tonight been moved. On the inside of the door, a taped wiring diagram mapped the lodge's lights. A thumbprint smudged the corner. Not Anders's. His hands were cracked and clean of oil. This print had the faint sheen of something sweeter. Rowan lifted his light to the ceiling where the service corridor crossed under the gallery. A hairline crack traced the plaster like a vein. He hadn't noticed it before. He knocked. The sound came back slightly hollower than solid. A crawl space? He filed it for later. The storm would make anything above them talk. Back to the hidden room. He returned them to the chamber of canvases for a slower look, because haste is how evidence gets away. On the far wall, a pegboard held studio knives and scrapers. One peg was bare. The outline left in dust was the exact silhouette of the bone-handled fox knife from the foyer's sunburst. Rowan felt the weight of that absence settle like truth. "Anders," he said quietly, "who has access to this room?" Anders looked ashamed, which is how honest men look when houses reveal themselves. Mr. Harland kept the key in his study, but he, sometimes, left it in the gallery when he worked late. "Which means," Rowan said, "anyone who knew where to look could come down here with patience and a reason." He turned full circle and stopped when his light snagged a smudge at knee height on the door jamb. Lipstick, not paint. A narrow coral shade. He glanced at Clara, whose mouth wore cold red, at Lydia, whose lips were bare, at Evelyn, who used no color, at a wine glass in the dining room earlier that had worn a salmon print. Salmon, not red. He filed it. Lydia broke the silence first. "He was going to show this," she said, and it was not a question. "The shroud, the will, this room was the third act." "He never reached it," Rowan said. "Someone made sure the curtain fell early." Graham spread his hands toward the studio knife, the rag, the slashed faces. "All very narratively convenient. You'll indict us with our own reflections." Rowan bagged one more thing, a tiny wire bristle, the kind that breaks from a brush used to clean machinery. In the lodge there were two such brushes, one hanging in the boiler room, the other lived in Anders's toolbox upstairs by the front door, because grease and grit followed guests in on their boots, and Anders took pride where no one saw. If the bristle had fallen here, someone had come down with a maintenance tool in hand. He looked at Anders. Anders's toolbox had been closed when they left. It would not be now when they returned. He let the room breathe. The reactions. Clara's composure had thinned to silk. You could see light through it if you tried. "I will not stand trial in my own home by a painting," she said. Yet her eyes kept returning to the slashed canvas that showed a woman's pearls bright as small moons above a stitched mouth. Miles hugged his arms and rocked once on his heels, a man bracing as if waiting for a punch from a direction he couldn't name. "He made us into monsters," he said. "What did he think would happen?" "Revelation," Lydia said. "Applause." She smiled without humor. "He didn't plan for the worst review." Evelyn's gaze had warmed again to focus. "He kept journals," she said, not to anyone, but as if reminding herself what to ask for next. "If he painted us as pathology, he wrote it too." Graham's control had frayed. "I will not be ruined by a man who delighted in ruin," he said. "Whatever his new will says, there are processes, precedents, you don't get to." Rowan raised a hand and the room stilled, because people obey a voice that carries no apology. What the house said. He let them stand in their discomfort while he made a final, slower sweep with his light, then with his ears. The house spoke in different timbres, the boiler's dull thrum, the wind's hum, the faint tick of a cooling pipe. And there, under it, the soft arrhythmic tick of the regulator clock through the floorboards above, slightly offbeat. Time had been touched. Clocks that disagree breed alibis. Rowan looked at Anders. "We'll need the safe," he said, "where the old will is, and your toolbox." Anders nodded once like a man asked to hand over his own name. Rowan faced them. "You see what Victor built?" he said and gestured around. "A hidden gallery to rehearse an unveiling. A will as a knife, a painting as a mirror. He meant to show you truths you wouldn't survive intact. Someone decided they wouldn't survive him showing them. He lifted the evidence bags one by one, not theatrical, only declarative. Charcoal with vertitor, canvas shavings, gesso flake, glass dust, silk thread, wire bristle, fuse puller out of place, dumbwaiter rope slicked in wax on the sill, a lipstick smudge where paint should be, 2 sets of prints. He did not say poison out loud. He did not need to. Evelyn's eyes had already flicked toward Victor's untouched burgundy and his half-empty water. "We'll finish the sweep," Rowan said. "Then we talk, one at a time." The storm pressed its mouth harder to the walls as if to hear. Somewhere above them, a shutter found its latch at last and stopped slamming. The sudden quiet felt like a drawn breath. Rowan looked at each of them in turn, so there would be no mistake later about what he had promised at this moment. "From here on," he said, "every step you take will be with me, or it will be the one that hangs you." He checked his watch. The second hand climbed like a man up a rope. "Now," Rowan said, and his voice had the warmth of iron, "let's go open the safe." Part 5. Suspicions and Interrogations. The storm had settled into a single, patient breath. It made the house feel smaller, like a palm closing. Rowan Hale took the key ring from Anders and led them back upstairs, past the gallery's watching faces, to Victor's study. The safe crouched behind a painting of a vineyard in late sun, pleasant, forgettable, the kind of work Victor used to disguise things he actually cared about. "Move it," Rowan said. Anders slid the canvas aside, revealing a steel door with an old-fashioned dial and a modern keypad retrofit. Anders tapped a code. The lock clacked. Inside, folders, jewel cases, a velvet pouch, and a flat bundle tied with red legal tape. Rowan set the bundle on the desk and untied it. The old will lay on top. He skimmed. This version was a year old, generous to Clara, indulgent to Miles, a fat fee to Graham, the collection destined for a museum. Anders thanked with a modest bequest. Evelyn not named at all, Lydia absent except as a line item, honorarium. He placed the old will beside the new one like 2 mirrors arguing. "Victor changed everything," Rowan said. 2 weeks ago. Graham leaned in. "And sprang it tonight to humiliate us?" Rowan's eyes flicked up. "You countersigned it, Mr. Tate." Graham's mouth was a thin line. "I signed dozens." "You signed this." Rowan tapped the page. "Tonight I'll decide if you read it." He returned to the safe. A shallow drawer held a steel fox letter opener, tail curled as a blade. He lifted it with a cloth. No blood, but a curl of red wax clung near the tail. The opener matched the faint impression he'd seen on the will's broken seal. He bagged it. Underneath, an envelope stamped Gallery, Cam 2. Inside, a micro SD card. "Camera 2, Lydia murmured. "The one that was dark." Rowan did not smile. Not dark to everyone. He slid the card into his pocket. Later, on the lowest shelf lay a small notebook, the same paper stock as Victor's ledger, bound rough. He flipped it open. Not numbers, names, dates, 1 page, confessions, Victor's word, for each person who had been in his circle this past year. A half page for Clara with arrows to the word gone circled 3 times, a page on Miles, debt/watch/threat, half a page on Graham, fees/variance/blackmail, a page for Evelyn with unlicensed/private meds/true diagnosis, a page for Lydia, knife/truth/sleeping with the subject. The last crossed out hard. A final page read simply, Anders, and beneath it, sees everything. Rowan shut the book. "We're done in here for now." He pointed at the 2 wills. "Leave them as they are. We're moving to statements. Alone." Clara's chin lifted. "At last." Rowan nodded to Anders. Dining room, fire lit, coffee strong. He looked to the others. Wait there. I'll call you in turn. If anyone goes anywhere else, you're volunteering to be arrested. Their faces told him he'd been heard. Clara. The dining room had cooled. The knife in Victor's chest was gone now. Anders had done the ugly mercy with Rowan's permission, and a plain linen lay where the violence had been. The storm drummed its steady hand on the glass. Rowan gestured to the chair at the far end. Mrs. Harland. Clara took the seat that let her see both doors. She folded her hands on bare wood, not the cloth. No tremor. You and Victor, Rowan began. What did he mean by you lied when you said it was gone? Clara's smile was pale. He was a collector. He meant everything. He meant something enough to write a note and hide it under your rug. Clara's eyes did not flinch. A bracelet, she said. One he gave me long ago. I told him I'd lost it. He insisted it would turn up when I needed it least. You may choose to find symbolism where none exists. Do you know where it is? In a safe deposit box in town, she said evenly. If you imagine it contains more than gold and guilt, you'll be disappointed. Rowan let that sit. Tonight, the blackout. You stayed in your chair. I did. Your ring tapping? She lifted her hand. The diamond winked, a cold star. It's a tick when I am bored or angry. Both were available. Who brushed past Lydia? Rowan asked. Probably my son, looking for an opportunity to be seen as helpful. Miles says he stood and sat. You're saying he walked. I am saying Miles moves when he should not and does not when he should. Rowan watched her face, the muscles barely moving. You inherit this house. Alone, he said. You think I wanted it? She whispered, for the first time sincerity cracking the veneer. Victor knew me well enough to make sure I would not be able to leave him even after he died. You could sell, and grant the buyers his ghost. Her lips thinned. No, I suppose I will keep the mausoleum and teach it new prayers. Did you know about the new will? Clara's laugh was a shard. I knew there would be one. Victor remade the rules when the room didn't worship him properly. Did you open it before dinner? No, she said at once, then paused. Graham might have. He cannot resist paper with power. Your lipstick, Rowan said. Coral, there's a smudge at knee height on the hidden room's door jamb. Clara blinked once. Perhaps I touched the door on the way past. I do not wear coral. I wear red. You didn't go through that service corridor. I do not walk in servant spaces, she said, and there was contempt there, maybe for the question, maybe for herself. Rowan leaned forward. What were you going to do tonight after the unveiling? Clara's mouth went brittle. Leave him, even without money, even with this house chained to my ankle. So you needed him alive, Rowan said. Or dead enough to release me, she said, and looked toward the covered chair at the head of the table only a second too long. He let her go. Graham Tate took the same chair and made the wood look like a witness stand. You're cut out of the new will, Rowan said, sliding both versions close so Graham had to see his name in ink and in erasure. You signed it anyway. I signed a sheaf of adjustments, Graham said. He brought them to my office with a performance about legacy. He slipped this one under the others. I know this man. He enjoyed sleight of hand. You smelled of cigar in the blackout. I stepped outside before dinner, Graham said. To the south porch, under the awning. I do not smoke indoors. Lydia smelled it at the table. Fresh. Her nose is as theatrical as her taste. Rowan took the microSD card from his pocket and set it between them. Camera 2 was dark for 3 hours. I found this labeled for it in the safe. Graham's eyes flicked to it, then away. I don't know Victor's habits with his toys, he said. You receive nothing under the new will, Rowan said. You receive fees, prestige, and leverage under the old. My reputation is worth more than either, Graham said too quickly. Rowan changed tack. Your hands, he said. Let me see them. Graham hesitated, then set them on the table. Square, manicured, a nick across the knuckle of the right index, the kind you get when you hit a doorframe in the dark. You stayed seated in the blackout? Rowan asked. I did. You didn't step to the sideboard? The fuse? I did not. You didn't open the will earlier? I did not, he said again, but sweat had begun to gloss his forehead. Rowan leaned back. You're a careful liar, Mr. Tate. I'm a lawyer, he said. It looks similar from the cheap seats. Rowan let him go. Evelyn. She arrived with the calm of a person who knows how to sit with discomfort and wait for it to speak. Your room, Rowan said. Your journals? I annotate to think, she said. Unlicensed meds in Victor's drawers. People with money acquire what they want, she said. Sometimes they want to sleep. Sometimes they want to feel less. Did you provide them? No, she said, but he gave me names I told him not to trust. He enjoyed ignoring advice. Victor's water, Rowan said. Untouched wine. You were the only one to comment. Because it was wrong, she said, simple as weather. He would not leave Burgundy untouched unless he was making a point or waiting. Waiting for what? A toast, she said. A reveal, or a poison to show its hand. You think he was poisoned,